Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Italy is My Boyfriend, a Memoir, by Annette Joseph, narrated by Devon Sorvari. Chapter 1. Getting to Know You. Rome was a summer romance, a first love, intense but brief, perfect for any student in search of art and beauty. I spent an entire summer before college traveling, touring, learning, eating, and basking in the Italian sunshine. It was the best summer of my life, but, true to its time frame, it was over in a heartbeat. I have never forgotten my love for Rome. I just tucked the memories away and moved on to acquaint myself with all the other beauties the country has to offer. My years here have revealed this truth. Italy, in all its multifaceted, glorious history and culture, has to be experienced in full. Over almost 3 decades, Italy has fed me, entertained me, confused me, excited me, lured me, promised me, lied to me, satisfied me, occasionally let me down, and utterly enchanted me. I leave, but I can't stay away. I always return. Always. Just like a beloved partner. As you can plainly see, Italy is my boyfriend. Years after that summer fling with Rome, I married my husband Frank, and we had 2 children. Family summer vacations were spent on the Italian Riviera, always near the beach, renting a house by the sea for 6 weeks at a time. I cooked, we went to the beach, we painted, we read and napped. Frank biked all over the countryside. We lived la dolce vita with kids in tow. Most Americans opt for Tuscany, but our family was different. We liked the sea and the seaside vibe. On our first family vacation to Italy in 1997, I found the Italian Riviera, called Liguria, through our dear friends Larry and Ola. They told us about a town called Santa Margherita Ligure on the east coast of Italy. Ola had vacationed there as a child from Denmark and loved it, so we went with them our first time, and it was immediate love for me. I had a sense that I had lived there in a past life. It felt very comfortable. That's where it began, my love affair with the Italian Riviera. We rented a pretty pink house at the uppermost ridge of town. We had never rented a house. It was a first, and with first times there are always a few nerves and the anticipation of things to come. But we felt pretty certain this would be an amazing summer. All the Ligurian seaside towns are built on cliffs with winding roads that lead down to the sea. We had a spectacular view, and a yard with an exotic garden with kiwis growing on vines covering the pergola. We had most meals looking out at the sea beneath that pergola, heavily bowed with the furry, ripened fruit. It was a typical Italian house, 2 floors with a tiny, well-appointed kitchen, big bedrooms, and a sitting room on the upper floor. The TV was big, and we spent evenings watching soccer games, since that was the only thing we could understand in Italian. The best part of that vacation for me was the beach club. It was exactly what I pictured an Italian beach club would look like. Red and white striped cabanas, striped chairs, and a wonderful little restaurant where we had lunch every day. Lunch consisted of heaps of salty fried calamari, fresh pesto pasta, and, always, the chilled house white wine. The beach club at Paraggi Beach, located between Portofino and Santa Margherita, was a daily ritual that made me love Italy even more. The kids played on the beach all day, and at day's end we would shower them in the camp-like shower stall at the club and dress them in tiny beach robes I had bought in town. The memory of their shiny, tan little faces eating an ice cream bar at the end of the day still makes me smile. While we loved our little beach club and seaside garden in Santa Margherita, in 2000 we rented a house in Levanto to experience another seaside town. It was sort of like dating around. We wanted to see how it differed and if we liked it as much. It was a renovated farmer's house situated just below a very large villa. At one time, the farmer had lived there and worked the land for the proprietors of the villa. The villa even had a tiny church right next to it, a family chapel that fascinated me. A family from Turin lived in the villa, which had been in the family for generations. Many, many generations, as Italians would insist, which again is quite common in Italy. In fact, it's the rule and not the exception that large estates are passed down to all members of a family. We met the family upon arrival, young parents like us with 5 boys, ages 4 to 11. For Levi, our son, this was a wonderful development. He was 7 at the time, and ready for anything, and was especially thrilled he would have a pack of boys to pal around with. The rental farmhouse was quite comfortable and beautifully decorated in a rustic style, with 5 big bedrooms and a huge terrace that cantilevered out over the cliff, affording insane sea views. I figured we would be living on that terrace, and I was right. Last but not least, the country kitchen was perfection. It had open shelving, a rudimentary gas stove from the 1960s, and thick Carrara marble tops that I would later hearken to when I was building our own country kitchen. It was simple and functional, and to me it was beautiful. I cooked all our meals there with immense pleasure. And I had a lot of meals to cook that first summer, too, as we had lots of visitors over our 6-week stay. And I mean lots. 5 families joined us that summer, about 25 people in all. I had felt confident that our friends would love the Italian Riviera as much as we did, so I invited everyone. I'm not kidding. Whenever I told our friends that we were renting a house for the summer at the Italian seaside, the next thing out of my mouth would be, "Why don't you come visit?" I learned that when you say that to people, they actually will show up. I didn't realize that I needed to be educated on hosting a crowd of house guests. Even now, having entertained summer guests for 25 years in Italy, there are always funny stories and some surprises. In Levanto, we settled in before the onslaught of guests. Levi quickly found that there were 2 donkeys in the field next to the house. He was thrilled to feed them carrots and apples every morning, and he would trek up to the villa to play with some newfound Italian friends. Even with the language barrier, they had a grand time running around the yard and tromping all over the place. Francesca, the new friend's mama, was tall, lean, and not at all how I pictured an Italian mama. She was blonde and dressed very preppy. In fact, she looked like a model from an Italian J. Crew catalog. I later learned that this was the popular look of the women of Turin. The coastline was inhabited in the summer by city folk from Turin and Milan. It was the go-to vacation destination for these families in this part of Italy. Women like Francesca chose to dress in a more buttoned-down Swiss style, since Turin shares its borders with the Swiss. This nugget of style info was the beginning of my learning how different all the regions in Italy are, and what makes the inhabitants of each region and city so unique. I had been stereotyping what Italians look like based on Sophia Loren, and of course I was way off. Each region has its own special style, not just in the food realm, but also in fashion and demeanor. Every morning, Francesca and her boys packed themselves into her little vintage Fiat 500 and puttered down the hill, bumping along the curvy back road from the villa to pick Levi up. They would all go to their private beach club, and Levi was in heaven. Our daughter Alex would read to her heart's content and help me prepare lunch each day. It was pretty much perfection. Well, to be truthful, not completely. There were chores that Alex was less than enthusiastic about, but would begrudgingly help me with. Frank brought his newly purchased American bicycle packed in a box that summer. It was literally a bike in a box. Frank had decided, back in our hometown of Atlanta, that assembling a bike in Italy was a good decision. In a country that builds bikes and virtually lives on bikes, how could a bike in 25 pieces seem like a great idea, I wondered. I thought it would be easier to just buy or rent a bike in Italy. So I was not completely on board with it, but this was his vacation too, and I was not going to rain on his parade. Here's how it turned out. Frank, who is a very adept guy, unfortunately had no luck building his 25-piece packable American bike. After 2 hours of trying to make a bike, we loaded the rental car with bike bits and headed down into town to find a bike repair shop. We found one, but the sweet little Italian bike repairman just scratched and shook his head simultaneously when he saw Frank's bike parts. Somehow, with my then shitty Italian and Frank's fairly good Spanish, the three of us got the bike together, back into the rental car, and returned home in an hour's time. Frank took the bike for a spin the next day and came back with a brand new Italian bike he'd rented in town. I did not say a word, and I still don't know what happened to the packable bike, but I thought the whole thing was pretty hilarious in the end. Frank loved biking all over the town, into the hills and mountains behind us. He'd come back just in time for lunch and an afternoon nap. It was pretty much the best daily routine ever, and the thing we all loved most about Italy. I like that it's referred to as a pausa, the pause, in some parts of Italy. The pausa consists of lunchtime and a nap and lasts for 3 hours every day, something, I will say, we got used to quite easily. To this day, our American guests struggle with what to do during pausa. The idea that the whole town shuts down for 4 to 5 hours blows their minds. That summer in Levanto, Judy and Robbie Johnson, parents we had become friendly with from Alex's school, and their daughters Mindy and Maura arrived with their large suitcases. I loved cooking for everyone and taking all the girls to the local flea market on Sunday. Sunday market in Forte dei Marmi is insanely fun. Imagine every Italian product from home to fashion in one large piazza. It's the best market on the Tuscan Riviera and has become one of my favorite places to take girlfriends when they visit. We had a blast there. Both families ate at the local pizzeria, gobbling tons of focaccia and gelato. We were having a grand old time in our country house as the days passed, until one night we came back from dinner and discovered we had been robbed. Apparently, the fantasy of the Italian countryside came with a warning of thieves. I had missed the memo. Tip number 1. Even though Italy is mostly safe, residences are prone to thieves. It's not an epidemic, but one should be mindful and not pack expensive jewelry. When we arrived home, our guests went to their room and quickly discovered Judy's jewelry was missing. All of it. We were all upset, but I always try to look at the bright side. A, no one was hurt. B, the Italian policemen were super handsome and wore really spiffy uniforms. So, at midnight, 2 fashionably uniformed policemen showed up at our door. Right off the bat, they suspected that the maid and an accomplice were probably responsible, since nothing else was stolen. We shared a bottle of wine with the officers and had a nice little chat, and then they were off into the night, and we headed to bed. Tip number 2. In Italy, one should offer a country cop a glass of vino, or at least an espresso. Our next set of guests were great travelers. In fact, they could not sit their butts down for a second, constantly needing to be occupied. Sometimes these can be the best guests, the kind of guests that will make you breakfast and coffee and play with your kids. Our friend Mickey and his boyfriend Bill fell into this category. They were energetic guests, always moving, never relaxing, hiking, biking, swimming, and playing with Levi non-stop. In fact, sometimes Mickey's manic energy was downright scary. Mickey loved the beach club and the water. We all did. A little about beach clubs. One has to join a beach club in town, or you can pay on a daily, weekly, or seasonal rate, but it's not cheap. Beach clubs are all very professionally run. In most cases, these clubs are family businesses. I mean generational, much like most businesses in Italy. Beach clubs are the summer vacation destination for most Italians, especially in Liguria. Italians will come to the same beach club for a lifetime. I find it interesting that one could go to the same spot every summer for a lifetime. In fact, some families have had the same cabana for generations. Let me explain what a cabana is. Some of you might be thinking that you know what a cabana is, but in Italy it is something quite unique. At the beginning of summer, one brings a season's worth of beach supplies to the club and stuffs everything into a rented cabana, a little wooden hut with a number on it, and locked with a key with a coinciding number on a key fob. There are hundreds of these little huts that line individual beach clubs. Italians love to go to the beach club dressed in street clothes, change, and then, when they are ready to leave, they shower and get dressed in street clothes, and usually head for an aperitivo at the club bar or nearby bar with their friends from the club. The first day at the beach, I said, "Mickey, don't break my kid." He just laughed, but sure enough, I was just about to doze off when I heard footsteps running towards me. I opened one eye to see Mickey carrying a bleeding Levi, not knowing where to take him. "Mickey!" I yelled. "Take him to the lifeguard station." Lifeguards at the beach club are pros, surfer boys, or studs, and they are trained in first aid. I mean, as well trained as a doctor. I pointed Mickey to the lifeguard station and ran behind to see the damage he had done to my boy. Fortunately, it was nothing serious, just a cut on the arm from playing on rocks covered in sharp mussel shells. It healed quickly. Mickey was a great guest, and my kids loved him, but Mickey never lived down the fact that it took him less than 5 minutes to break my kid. Since we had fired the maid, thinking she must be a crook, it was up to Alex and me to run my self-proclaimed B&B. Laundry is an issue if you've invited 1 million people to stay with you in the Italian countryside. Imagine that. It seems that most Italians hate clothes dryers, so we didn't have one. There was no dryer, but we had full access to clotheslines strung up in the garden. My most vivid memory of Alex that summer was our hanging out hundreds of sheets and towels to dry on those clotheslines. We hung and folded laundry every single day. We wrapped our heads in scarves to protect us from the sun beating down. Did I mention it was one of the hottest summers on record in Italy? We were bitten by mosquitoes, scratched by thistles, and were generally miserable. We pictured ourselves looking like quintessential Italian mamas, kind of how I pictured Francesca before I actually met her. I think I scarred our daughter that summer. She's still not keen on coming to the Italian countryside for fear of hard labor. Turns out those pretty pictures of Italian laundry floating in the breeze are really pretty hard work. Like everything in life, it's usually not as easy-breezy as it looks. Our funniest and least traveled guests were the last to arrive that summer. They were dear friends, a newly married middle-aged couple who had asked to visit. Of course, I said yes. The funny thing about people that don't travel much is that sometimes they don't ask questions up front and end up making some wonky travel decisions, which was the case here. I like to call them timid travelers. The day they were to arrive, we headed to the beach in the morning. Their arrival time was planned to be around 6 p.m., just in time for aperitivo and supper. Like most days, we had a great time playing in the sea all day. We headed back up the hill to the house around 5 because I wanted to get the kids bathed and myself ready before their arrival. As we walked towards the house, we noticed a tiny car parked in front with the windows rolled down. We figured correctly that our guests had arrived early, and we walked into the house to discover Rick and Marin passed out in the front room, sound asleep. They must have heard us come in, because they rallied and sat up. "Ciao," I said. "You're here. Welcome." Rick responded with a grunt and mumbled, "That damn car was a stick shift. It took me half an hour to remember how to use a manual car, and the damn thing does not have air conditioning." "What?" I said. "That's impossible." "Nope, these damn Italian cars don't have anything," he complained. Marin agreed, shaking her head and rubbing her eyes. She said, "We almost died coming here. It was boiling hot, and there is no radio." Knowing this couldn't be right, I insisted, "Wait a minute, that can't be. Let's go have a look." "Well, we really almost died of heat." Marin insisted. We all made our way to the tiniest car in the world, and right there on the dashboard was a snowflake icon. I asked, "Did you try pushing this? It's usually the symbol for frozen air." Marin went pale and asked, "You mean we drove all the way down here on the autostrada for 3 hours, sweating up a storm with the windows down, and all we needed to do was push this button?" We all had a laugh, then a shower, and spent the evening on the terrace, talking and eating and drinking vino into the night. Chapter 2. Looking for the Right One. About the time Rick and Marin arrived, I kept having thoughts about buying property in Italy. One night before dinner, we were drinking wine on the terrace, and Francesca came down from the villa to check in. I asked if she'd like to have a glass of wine with us. Since I knew absolutely nothing about her, I thought it might be nice to get to know each other. She shared that she'd grown up with the villa as their summer house. Her father was an oil painter, which was wild because so was my father. Of course, with that in common, we had an instant connection, which was nice. Her husband, Enrico, and she lived in Turin with their 5 boys. Enrico was an architect, which I figured out much later was a descriptive used in 2 different ways in Italy, both as an actual architect as we think of them in the U.S., and also as an interior designer. He was the former, which explained why the farmhouse was so well designed and well appointed. We chatted about children, travel, and cooking. At this point, I felt comfortable enough to ask her if she knew of any real estate for sale in the area. The reason I was hesitant was not because I did not know her, it was because I had not even broached the subject with my husband, Frank. But it couldn't hurt to look, right? Frank was off with the kids on a mini-trip to Germany to visit his aunts, 70-year-old twins, so I felt comfortable gathering information without Frank rolling his eyes at me. Rick, however, was so in, since he was a builder in the U.S., the prospect of house hunting in Italy intrigued him. Francesca said she would ask around and get back to us. Frank arrived later that evening after dinner, and Rick brought up the idea of looking at some real estate, so I was thankfully spared the eye-rolling. That would come later. The next day, Francesca barreled down the hill from the villa to pick up Levi like she did every morning. This time, she rolled down her window. "I think I have a property for you to look at about 30 minutes away. How about we go after lunch?" "Of course," I said. "After lunch is perfect." After a yummy lunch of fresh seafood pasta, arugula salad, and slices of pineapple for dessert, we headed to the car where Francesca was waiting for us. "Follow me," she said. Frank, Rick, Marin, and I jumped in the car and drove closely so we would not lose Francesca. About 100 meters down the road, Francesca stopped. Apparently, there was a minor issue at the villa, so she gave us directions and told us she would meet us in the driveway of the house that was for sale. The directions seemed simple and doable, so we agreed that we would meet there. I was driving, and Frank was the navigator. Since I had spent so much time in this area, I knew it well, so I felt confident finding the exact location would not be an issue. We drove the winding roads for about half an hour before arriving at our destination, the driveway right before the railroad bridge, as Francesca had said. I pulled into the driveway, and we all got out to assess the situation. Marin and I decided that we would blaze the trail and head towards the house, which looked to be miles down the driveway. The guys would stay behind and drive down with Francesca when she arrived. As we began wandering down the drive, we could not help but be very curious and excited about what might lie ahead. We walked for what seemed like hours down the magical forest path. Birds chirped, frogs croaked, and I could swear I saw wood nymphs playing among the trees. I looked at Marin and said, "Wow, this is amazing. I am so excited. Could we be so lucky to find the one so easily?" Marin, who was equally mesmerized by the beauty all around us, said, "I wonder what this house looks like if this is the entrance." Keep in mind, the price Francesca quoted was very affordable, so we were both a bit perplexed by how this could be the right setting. We finally arrived at the clearing at the end of the driveway, and we found an enormous golden villa flanked by its own chapel. There was that personal chapel again. I decided right then and there I needed a chapel in my life, which is funny since I am Jewish, but in any case, this had become a personal non-negotiable in my house hunt. My stomach was doing backflips. It was hard not to jump up and down and squeal, which I am pretty sure I did. Marin looked at me in awe and said, "Whoa, this is amazing. It's perfect." I noticed a car in the driveway, then wandered around to the chapel side and looked in a window. Suddenly, I was struck by the realization that this was not the right house. Francesca had said it was abandoned, and this villa was very much lived in. Horrified that we had just trekked down someone's private driveway, I told Marin, "This is wrong. This can't be the right place." "What?" she whispered. "This is someone's private residence, and we are clearly trespassing." We really did not know whether to laugh or bolt up the driveway. We chose to do both, laughing hysterically all the way up the driveway. When we reached the top, Frank and Rick were smirking. Francesca stood behind them with a startled look on her face. It turns out that in Italy, most folks in the country have guard dogs, and we were lucky we did not get mauled that day. Needless to say, we had a good giggle and headed to the right location to look at the abandoned villa. I still had high hopes, and even though the mistaken magical villa was not the one, I was feeling lucky. We all piled into the car once again and headed up the road right behind Francesca's car, careful not to lose her. She pulled into a driveway on the right, up the road and around the corner from the villa with the chapel. We noticed that the driveway needed some work. We parked the cars and all followed Francesca down, down, down to a platform made of wood and covered in black tar and tarps. The view was spectacular. In fact, we had an amazing overview of the beautiful villa we had just trespassed. Frank asked Francesca, "Where's the house?" "We are standing on the roof," she responded. We all looked down, then up again at each other in disbelief. This was not a house, this was a mess, and it was indeed abandoned, not only abandoned, but invisible. Frank politely asked, "How much do they want for this?" 500,000 euros, Francesca responded. Silence, then we all broke out in laughter, looking around this pile of rocks and trash. Standing on the roof of this disaster, we laughed so hard that we cried. Francesca seemed a bit insulted that we thought this real estate prospect was so funny. We tried to stop laughing, but the more we tried, the harder it was to stop. I said to Frank, "This is perfect. If we buy this, we can sink a ton of money into it and still not have the beautiful villa we just saw. Plus, I can be tortured every day with the view of the beautiful villa and the chapel of my dreams." As we continued to look at properties over the years, we would find that this was not unusual at all. In fact, showing Americans impossible projects that an Italian would not touch with a 10-foot pole was the norm. As an Italian would say, this was a brutta figura, which loosely translated means a bad thing, and it marked the beginning of our house hunt in Italy. Back in the car, Frank said he was on board with finding a home in Italy, but we both agreed it needed to be the right fit, in the right location. Looking for the right one would take time and perseverance, and luckily, we had plenty of both. Frank headed back to the U.S. a few days after our house hunting adventure, while I stayed on with the kids for a few more weeks. I continued to cook, walk into town to do the marketing, battle the army of ants that had taken up residence in the kitchen, clean, and do the laundry. Alex and I continued to hang laundry on the clothesline next to the donkeys that had little interest in us if we did not have a carrot in hand. Levi continued his having fun-filled days playing with the boys from the villa all over town.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?